All right. Well, welcome everybody to our webinar series. After the update, we're going to do a quick succession of webinars to kind of introduce the new functionality that we spent quite a bit of time developing. And the first one of those is going to be Sales Order Allocation, which is a new feature. And for some companies that take advance orders and want to allocate inventory without having to create a ship doc, this is what it's all about. In other words, in the past, in order to kind of allocate, we call it committed, the inventory, you had to have a ship doc, and the ship doc would just sit there until you shipped it, and then so that was the only way of doing that. However, now we've come up with the allocations, which allows you to essentially allocate inventory directly to the ship doc, to the sales order itself, and have it on the sales order. You can even create a pick ticket of that sales order with the exact bins and everything like that. I'll go through that as well, without having to create a ship doc. Later on, the same process, you create a ship doc and it'll take the allocations and create that ship doc. Now, not every company wants to do allocation. So in order to turn off the allocation, you go to your preferences and you uncheck enable allocations. And then it's basically not enabled, and you just do the regular ship doc or sales order to ship doc without doing allocation in between. In addition, you would set up your users. So the main thing with the users is who has the right to allocate. All right. So that's kind of, it's not even part of each one of these because it affects a lot of different areas. So here it is right here. So you would set up your rules, and by default, everybody, all the rules that you had set up in the past have the ability to allocate. If you do not want them to allocate, like a salesman rule, you would uncheck that, press save. So that's the way you control whether you want allocated in your system at all and who has the right to allocate. Because allocation, you're reserving the inventory. Okay. So I have an example here. I've created a sales order, and you'll see also that I have two new columns here. I have the allocation percent and the allocation status. Okay, I now put that in. So we'll go and we'll open up our sales order, and I added two items. I approved the sales order. I can see that there's plenty of inventory. Okay, and then I've added a couple of other columns here: allocated and unallocated. So in order to allocate, there's a button here. I just click that button, and it goes ahead and it allocates the stock. So now I see that it's completely allocated, this inventory, and it's removed it from available. But let's see in detail what happened to the actual item itself. So the actual item, we still have the 100 on hand, but it's allocated. Okay. That's why it reduces the available, and that's what we want. Now we just continue on our normal path. It's already allocated, and so in this case, I've allocated both items right up to the order quantity, so it's going to take both allocations. If I only allocated one of them, then it'll only take the one allocation. If I want to kind of manipulate in detail the allocation, I can see here I have my bins over here, and I can remove that, maybe make that the 5. All right, so I only want to allocate a partial in terms of the second item. So that's the way I do that. Okay, so you can see here we've only allocated 5, and unallocated will be 5. So I'm just going to go ahead now and do my ship doc. Right. And as you can see, the ship doc will take only what's allocated, even though we did have that in stock. That's a very important point. Okay, very important. Had I not allocated at all, it would have picked up the entire 10 units. But because I allocated, I told the system specifically, no, don't ship the entire 10, just do the 5. And that's what it did. Now, if I delete the ship doc, I'm going to do that now. I'm going to delete the ship doc. And basically, it just frees up that inventory, and it's no longer allocated on the sales order as well. All right. So if I delete the ship doc, I basically I don't put back the allocation on the sales order. We don't do that. You have to come back here and reallocate. Okay, so now it's reallocated. If I want to deallocate it, I just press this button, deallocate. Okay. All that I can do also from the list. So for example, I can check, allocation, allocate. So now it's going to go and do our pending allocation complete. Both of those are 100% allocated. See that? 100% allocated. Right? So I can partially allocate it by going there and specifically, right? I do have my available here, so I can actually delete this and then allocate it like that as well. Boom. Right? You see that? It says here quantity, open quantity, quantity allocated, quantity unallocated, and the bin that it went to is this bin. So there is a quantity allocated, and of course I can deallocate like that as well. All right, now if you wanted to create a pick ticket with the allocations, we've also adjusted the form templates. So in the ship doc, if you want to put in the bins and all that, when you look at the data, we had another thing over here that says fill, the kind of this, you got the items section and you got the detail section. And then you can have like bin, lot number, quantity, etc. We can now do that also on the sales order templates. So let's say I have this pick list template, right? And I want to add the bins here, so I can check that, and now it's going to print off the bins. So we'll do that. Okay. We'll go back to the sales order. We'll allocate it, and then the pick list should print those bins. Okay, there it is. So kind of combining in a way the ship doc with the sales order in one area. Now, in terms of when you allocate, it's no longer quote unquote required, right? So allocation reduces the required. So I don't know if you remember, the required is 0 because we've allocated, right? Even though I haven't shipped this, I've allocated it. If I deallocate it, and now the required is going to be back at 10. That's a very important point. So allocation also, when you're doing your, your reorder point, your reorder analysis, your reports and stuff like that, allocation reduces what required. Allocation does not reduce the open sales orders. They're still quote unquote open, right? So on this report here, even if you allocate, so we have a report, the open sales orders by item detail, open sales orders by item detail. This one here will show the item even though it's allocated. We'll show the item even though it's allocated. Okay, that's because it's still quote unquote open. It hasn't been ship docked yet, right? So it is open. Now, of course, you can do a calculation if you want to kind of do, open after allocations. We can do let's say a calculated field, and that can give you, open even after allocation. So it's pretty simple. It's open quantity minus allocated. We'll show you what's open even allocation. So there's a little bit of kind of getting used to it, that. But basically, the big difference between allocation and really the numbers shouldn't change dramatically in terms of your available, or if you're using net available, except that if you can allocate an unapproved order. That's important, because approved orders are the only thing that kind of are open or approved. But here I can even allocate if it's not approved. See, the buttons still appear here. I can do that. Of course, we want to do that because it doesn't require approval to start to allocate if your user is allowed to allocate. All right. We also,
Ian, your microphone's doing something weird. You might want to move it around a little bit.
Okay, can you hear it okay now?
Yeah. And also there was a question, when does the item show committed quantity?
Okay. So let's say we now approve. So we're going to allocate. All right. So it's allocated. So going back to this item over here, this item is allocated. Now, when I create the ship doc, watch what happens. Create the ship doc. Okay. Now it should move from allocated to committed. Oop. Well, it should have done it the minute we created the ship doc, but looks like there's something that I had to toggle the status to do that. So we'll take a look at that. But generally, the minute you create the ship doc, it should move from, allocate should become 0 and committed should become 10. Then when I actually do shipped or closed, then at that point, both of them should be 0, and then the on hand and available should be the same. Any questions on that?
Can you show again the columns that are on the sales order list that they need to add to see the allocation?
Mm-hmm. So it's allocation percentage and allocation status. So if I only allocated a partial, so now there's the percentage now. We should.
Yeah, just a note with what he just did, the sales order was already set to approved, so he couldn't, make it a partial allocation. He had to set it back to processing. That's what just happened there.
So that's that. And then basically it's just those columns there. It's called allocation percent and allocation. So you can also put it, obviously you can also put that on the page layouts. Right? Now, another thing that this is really great for is that there's a preference on receiving, purchasing. That if you have linked POs, after creating the receiver, you can automatically allocate to the sales order or to the work order. Okay. So if you have that, and you know how you have to create linked POs, it can automatically allocate to those linked POs. So in a workflow where you know you're creating a linked PO, you receive the PO, it can automatically push those items that you receive to that sales order, so it kind of keeps it there and reserves it for that sales order. Okay, and the same thing obviously for a work order that's been there for a while, so you can do that.
Okay, we've got some questions coming in. If a sales order has multiple ship docs created, is there a way to force them to combine into one invoice to sync to QuickBooks?
Yeah. That is under shipping, and it's this preference right here. It's either add the items to an unshipped ship doc having the same customer and location. That's one. Add the items to an unshipped ship doc from the same sales order. That's probably the one you want. But remember, it has to be unshipped. In other words, the status has to be unshipped. Or always create a new ship doc. So that's under preferences, shipping.
Okay, and then the other question, if we've been using a workaround of creating ship docs in a custom status to hold the future inventory, should we be setting a future date to start using allocation? Wondering if anyone has had an experience with implementing this as a process. So basically, they were using a workaround to allocate before by having a ship doc that was already, in a custom status. And now they probably don't have to do that anymore now that sales order allocation is a thing.
All they have to do is do the allocate. And then when it's ready, create the ship doc.
Mm-hmm.
And they can keep on allocating, right? They can allocate more than once until the whole doc is full, completely allocated. You know what I mean? She got it.
Yep. Yeah, it pretty much solves the need for that workaround at this point.
Now there is something we have to take a look at with the allocation of the kits. I know that you're using kits, so there is something that we have to take a look at, Tara, before you do start implementing that full board. Let me take a look at that. Okay. Anything else?
I'm looking at the document right now to see if there's anything. We showed partial allocation. We showed how to turn it off. We showed the list columns.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, it's one of those things that there's not a lot of UI to show about it, right? There's really not, because it's just literally a function that could clear up your workflow, because we don't have to, you don't have to know really what's been shipped and what's available and think about this. I mean, you literally just need to allocate your things, and if it's 90% or whatever your business rules, okay, this is 100 or over 50% allocated, let's ship it. let's do a partial, or just do everything that's 100. You know what I mean? So you would come in here, your workflow would be, allocate whatever you need to allocate. And what we're going to do once we kind of get more, this becomes more of an ingrained things, and all the the bits and pieces are also worked out. We're going to do like things like every time, like a preference, allocate the minute you do approved, for example, or allocate, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, to automate it even further.
Right. Exactly.
And for any other information that you need about this feature, we have a knowledge base article. I'm going to put the link to it in the chat. Andrew asks, is that allocation percent based on the open quantity?
The allocation percent is based on the ordered quantity. The ordered quantity. So if you allocate partial and ship, yes, then you would allocate again. So so you may miss that, but yeah. So let me pick. I would have to test that, Andrew. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to make a note of that. You're going to make a note of some of these questions.
Yeah, I'm saving the chat. I gotta look at
but the idea basically is you allocate what you want to allocate, and only the things that you want to allocate. Then you do the ship doc, and then there's a partial shipment. When the inventory comes in, you allocate that and then create the ship doc. But the question is that once you allocate once, what is the percentage based on? Is it based on the open quantity or the ordered quantity? So we'll take a look at that. It's a good question.
Any other questions about sales order allocation or different practical uses that you guys have, that you have questions involving your type of business?
Well, we welcome the feedback, whatever feedback you might have, whether it's something that what was the question?
Is this in the summary now by default?
No. You mean in the no, I added it. I added it as I added this field.
Yeah, so you got to go to the page layouts of your sales order and then you drag it over.
Probably it wouldn't be a bad idea to put it out over here or something like that up here. Like the percentage allocation.
Oh, she means on the item itself. Is there a field?
The item you have to expose it. Use that. It's right here.
Oh, okay. So it's just a column that can be added called allocated.
Yeah, to the inventory.
Gotcha. Does that help, Tara?
Send in a ticket.
Yeah, yeah, we'll just do that as a feature request. And we'll add it. She means in the summary of the item, I guess. Yeah.
Yes,
it's just like a total allocated.
Yeah, but send in the feedback. We don't, it's a good idea. You know us. We'll put it in.
It's a great idea. I'm writing it down too. Okie dokie. Any further questions? Otherwise, we're gonna jump off, y'all. And remember, this whole webinar has been recorded. It'll be put up in our past webinar section. I'll probably be sending out an email tomorrow to prepare people for next week's repair orders webinar, which you can sign up for. And then there's going to be a webinar the following week. It's 3 straight weeks of webinars. The third one will be about all the other features in 1031 and what we've added, so that we can go over that with you. No, doesn't look like any further questions. So we'll talk to you all later and have a great weekend.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.